Story 1. I get very nervous around women who are into me, especially when I know she is watching me do something, even something trivial. On an early date, we went to the local shop to pick up some things for a picnic, including some gum. I was thinking really hard and aware that I was being watched. I had this money on the counter, gum in my mouth. Easy. Suffice to say, when I put the gum on the counter and a €2 coin in my mouth, the cashier was baffled and my girlfriend, now my wife, was crying with laughter. Story 2. I turned her down when she suggested we go on a date, because I am super awkward. I was working at Starbucks. I was new in town and had noticed her a few times. She was a regular and we started some small talk about places to eat. She said there is an amazing taco place down the road and suggested we go sometime. I misheard her and thought she said I should go sometime. I replied that I will definitely check it out, handed her a drink, and she left awkwardly. She returned the next day and, against all odds, I cleared up the misunderstanding and wrote my number on her Starbucks cup. We went to that taco place for our first date. She was right. It was amazing. 3 years later, we are married and have 2 children. I am really glad she saw through my awkwardness. Story 3. I forgot her name once when introducing her to a friend. This was about a month into our relationship. I said, "Hey, by the way, this is my girlfriend." Story 4. Not my story, it's my parents. Some backstory. My dad has a brother only a couple of years older. Growing up, they often tried to steal food off each other's plates just to be jerks. That was remedied by plate guarding and defensive moves with utensils when hands got too close. On my parents' first date, my mom reached to take something from my dad's plate and he instinctively stabbed her hand with his fork, drawing blood. He was obviously mortified. I'm glad my mom was crazy enough to keep dating him, marry him, and have children with the fork stabber. Story 5. On our second date, I arrived an hour late. When I greeted her with a small hug, I accidentally knocked her phone out of her hand. It hit the ground and cracked the screen, but I was not sure if it had already been cracked. I apologized and she said it was okay and that the screen had been like that before. Almost a year later, she confessed that I had actually broken her phone that day. She had just received it from her mother. All the phones she had ever had were secondhand and very simple, and she could not afford a new one at the time. She lied and kept using the broken phone so I would not feel bad. My heart sank. We have been married 2 years now, and I have given her a brand new flagship phone every year since. Story 6. My wife was a devout animal lover and activist. I planned a proposal at a fancy Tokyo restaurant that only takes 3 tables a night and serves 11 courses, each filled with inventive surprises so you are never sure what will come next. Between courses, the chef brought out a small glass bowl with live firefly squid that are local to the bay. My wife was delighted and practically named them. 2 courses later, they reappeared as entrees, floating on a glass plate lit from below and arranged to look like they were swimming. She still said yes, but she has never let me forget that I took her to what she called the worst dining experience she had ever had, and that I paid more for it than ever before. Story 7. I played Weird Al Yankovic CDs nonstop for a 6-hour car trip to the beach. She didn't ditch me, but I haven't been allowed to play Weird Al Yankovic in her presence for the past 24 years. I got tickets to see him this year for our anniversary and knew better than to ask her to join me. So I took a couple of my kids who appreciate the finer things in life. It was the best anniversary gift ever and a great show. Story 8. I'm a soon-to-be wife. When we first met, it was during an introduction class or something like that. He kept kissing the teacher's ass, talking way too much, and being kind of a show-off. I wanted to punch him in the face. Come to find out, he was in almost all my classes. For lunch, a couple of girls and I decided to go to McDonald's. He invited himself, and I was annoyed. 2 months into our relationship, he confessed that he had seen me, was intrigued, and wanted to get to know me. He did everything to get my attention. He is an extrovert and I am an introvert. I am surprised he actually managed to get my attention. We have been together for 10 years and are getting married on September 23rd. Story 9. On my first date with my wife, we talked about tattoos. I have a rule that if I have an idea for a tattoo, I sit on it for a while to see if I still want it. I mentioned this to her and explained how glad I am that I do this because otherwise I would be covered in Tool the Band tattoos or some other dumb stuff. She rolled up her sleeve to show that she had the lyrics to one of their songs tattooed across her arm. The lyrics are "All this pain is an illusion" from Parabola. For the record, I do not hate Tool. I was super into them in high school and have since grown out of them, but I still listen to them once in a while. Another note. My oldest brother unironically has a Creed tattoo on his leg. There is always somebody who has it worse than you. Story 10. 5 years ago, after dating for 2 weeks, I accepted a job offer on another continent. I told her we did not know each other well enough for me to pass up an opportunity like that, and that if it was meant to be, it would work itself out. It was meant to be, and we married this spring. Story 11. We had a couple of great dates and things were looking promising. Then I became very busy at work and did not contact her for about 3.5 weeks without warning. She decided to move during that time. After things calmed down at work, I texted her again. We maintained a long-distance relationship and finally got married. Every few months she reminded me that I had not asked her out again for a very long time. Story 12. My husband kept calling me by the name of his previous girlfriend on our first date. I finally told him to give her a call because they clearly had unfinished business. He called, and she reminded him why he had been glad to have her out of his life. He never called me by that name again. 40 years later, it has worked out in my favor. Story 13. My husband broke my thumb one night when we were slightly tipsy. Horseplay got too rough. From my hazy memory, he slammed my hand against a surface. We both heard the pop, and I burst into tears. Story 14. Not the married man, but on probably our third or fourth date, my man mixed our soups. I had a watermelon gazpacho, a cold soup, and he had a seafood bisque. I am a sharer, so we both tasted and did not love mine, but we loved his. After the tasting, he boldly yet nervously said that his was so great and poured our 2 soups into one. It was the worst lukewarm thing I have ever tasted. 5 years later, we have never mixed soups again because it is too risky. Story 15. I accidentally set her hair on fire with a match while lighting a cigarette. It was not good. We are still married 29 years later. I do not smoke anymore. Story 16. Not my story, but my first-door neighbors. I did not know their story until one day a friend told me what happened and she confirmed it. She was at a party and noticed him looking at her from time to time. She liked him and decided to make the first move. She took a few shots for courage and went over. As the night went on, she kept drinking while talking to him and became extremely drunk, unable to walk. He did not drink much and assumed she could hold her liquor. When she stood up from the couch after a few hours, the alcohol overwhelmed her. As a gentleman, he offered to carry her home. This was when we were late teens with no car and no money. He started to give her a piggyback ride home, a walk of about 30 to 45 minutes. He managed to carry her on his back for about 500 meters from her home, then stopped to take a break because his back hurt. He decided to carry her in his arms. A few steps later, he noticed a very unpleasant smell. Since he was not from our area and it was a rural neighborhood, he asked her, barely conscious, what the awful smell was. She mumbled that she had soiled herself and then passed out in his arms. She only came back to say she was sorry and passed out again. He brought her home and laid her on the floor because he was afraid of messing up her bed or couch, and left. After a few moments he came back, woke her up, and asked if she would mind if he helped her shower. Since she could not sleep for 8 hours covered in feces, it would be unhygienic and unsafe, and her house would smell. She agreed, and after he bathed her, she asked him to sleep in her bed in case she needed him. Once I asked him how on earth he got over that. He said they clicked at first sight and he felt he had to take care of her because he had taken responsibility for getting her home safely. He said that if she had refused the bath he would have backed off, but then he probably would not have been with her because soiling yourself while very drunk is understandable, but sleeping all day like that would have been too unpleasant. He lay beside her until she fell asleep, then watched television until she woke up. They were inseparable after that first date. I have not seen them apart since. It has been almost 15 years, and they recently had a beautiful little daughter. Story 17. On our second date, we drank a lot and took an Uber home. The next day, we went back to get his car and it was gone. He was devastated. He had just bought it and thought it had been stolen. We filed a police report. Took forever and was awful. We walked to his friend's house nearby and there was his car. Not stolen at all. He had drunk so much that he forgot he had moved it before our date. Now, once in a while when we are trying to find our car in a grocery store parking lot or elsewhere, one of us will say that it is stolen and to call the police. Story 18. I was sitting on the couch while we were playing Wii bowling. She was standing behind the couch, holding me. I drew back the Wii remote controller and accidentally hit her in the face at full strength. Her mother was also in the room. Story 19. I did not actually do it, but I thought he would be weirded out anyway. The first time he stayed at my house, after about 3 hours of my 2 male roommates trying to make him uncomfortable, we went to bed and he put his contact lenses in 2 shot glasses of water because he had no case. I do not know if that was a dumb thing to do. I have never worn contact lenses. Maybe we had been drinking and it seemed like a good idea. He had never had a pet and was kind of puzzled by my cat standing beside him and meowing loudly all night. He asked if that was normal and if the cat was mad at him. I woke up the next day to find the cat had drunk all the water from the shot glasses, contact lenses included. I had to help him home because he was essentially blind without them. He still wanted to see me again even though the night had been strange, and the cat became his best friend despite some initial skepticism on both their parts. Update. I recently asked him why we put his contact lenses in water, and he said it was contact lens solution from one of my roommates who had contact lenses but no spare case for him to borrow, so we used the shot glasses. That makes much more sense. Chucky was fine after drinking the solution, though we did call the veterinarian. I had forgotten that detail. It was 17 years ago. Story 20. He insisted that all of San Francisco was within walking distance and wanted us to walk from Pier 39 to Golden Gate Park. It is walkable, but not suitable for a third date or for the shoes she happened to be wearing that day. Story 21. My uncle did not call the woman who would later become his wife for over a year after they first met, and he had her phone number. He kept the paper she had written it on, later found it, and called her to ask if she remembered him and was interested in going on a date. Story 22. Wife here. About 3 weeks into our relationship, my husband thought it would be romantic to pick me up and spin me around in his driveway. Unfortunately, it was not his most brilliant idea, and he tripped and we fell right onto the concrete next to my car. He landed on top of me. Story 23. I can tell you about him. We were leaving his new apartment. Keep in mind we had been dating for a short time. We had not been through many firsts yet. His apartment was at the back of the building, so we had to walk through a small passage to get to the other side to leave. The passage was slightly shadowed, but light shot through it, creating a romantic silhouette. As we left his apartment and walked into the passage, he grabbed my hand and pulled me toward him. I thought, he is going to put my hand around his waist. How romantic. Instead, he locked my hand on his butt and loudly farted. It was a very brave move for a new couple. We have been married for 13 years now. Story 24. I am the wife. About 3 weeks into dating, my husband invited me to a house party at his best friend's place. We were playing beer pong and having fun. The other team was up and tossed the ball. I leaned forward to try to block it. My now husband extended his hand in front of me at the same time, catching the ball but hitting me in the eye and somehow pulling out 3/4 of my eyelashes. He felt terrible and, in drunken sympathy, tried to burn off his own eyelashes. He hates when I bring it up, but I think it is the funniest story. Story 25. She was about to sneeze and was sitting partly on my lap, so I thought she was going to sneeze on me. I don't know what I was thinking, but I raised my hand to block the sneeze. I was holding a glass, which prevented her from covering her own sneeze, and she slammed her face into my glass. We have been married 6 years now. She still has all her teeth. Story 26. I made myself a burger for dinner before heading over to her place to hang out. Unfortunately, I'm not the best cook and left the burger a little too pink. While we were at her house, I bet her I could fit through the doggy door and crawled right through. She immediately closed it behind me. We raced to the front door. She won and locked it. At that moment, my bowels decided they had had enough of the burger, and I felt a stomach cramp. Luckily, I held it and ran back to the back door with my cheeks clenched, knocking desperately. She was laughing at first, but when she saw my face go suddenly serious, I said very calmly, "I need you to open the door now, please." She unlocked the door and asked if I was okay. I told her to stay downstairs and turn the television up loud. She agreed but was very confused. I ran upstairs and then had one of the most violent bowel movements of my life. I thought the worst was behind me until I went to wipe and, of course, there was no toilet paper. I yelled for her, texted her, and called her, but got no answer. After about 10 missed calls, she finally answered. I asked her to bring me some toilet paper, leave it outside the door, and try not to breathe on the way upstairs. She followed my instructions and immediately started making fun of me when I came back downstairs. Now, quite a few years later, with a couple of kids and a cat, she's still making fun of me. Story 27. We were taking a shower together. She was soaping up while I was under the hot water rinsing off when she slipped. Instead of grabbing or helping her, I pulled away because I thought I had already rinsed off and did not want to get soapy. Thank God she caught the shower curtain and did not get hurt. She was not happy. My explanation of my faulty thinking did not help either. We laugh about it now, but it required serious smoothing over at the time. Story 28. I know what my husband would say because I still tease him to this day. We had been dating for 2 weeks and were spooning on his futon watching a movie. Out of nowhere he said, "I'm really sorry. I can't hold it in anymore," and ripped a huge fart. My husband was a very clean, tight-knit, prudish man, so I couldn't help but laugh as he turned almost as red as his beard. Story 29. A little late to the party, but here is my story. When we had only been dating about a month, my then boyfriend went to pick me up, I assume, and accidentally threw my head through the ceiling, giving me a concussion. He is 6 feet 8 inches tall and had misjudged the distance. I also had a hard time getting used to his height and regularly kneed him in the groin for about 2 years while cuddling, so I think we are even. We have been together 6 years now, and I am proud to say we have not injured each other in about 4 years. Story 30. I had just started a job working with her and, unbeknownst to me at the time, her mother and I did not get along. My comment was, "What's up with that thick bitch?" directed at her. She said, "Oh, I'll tell my mom you said hi." I was dead. But hey, here we are, married 16 years. Story 31. It wasn't until after we were married that my wife told me I almost didn't get a second date because I talked way too much during the movie. I don't really remember it, but apparently I was leaning over every 30 seconds or so to tell her what I was thinking. Also, Valkyrie with Tom Cruise probably wasn't that great of a date movie, but it all worked out in the end. Edited to add, please forgive my movie talking sins, everybody. I was a dumb teenager and she's really pretty. I was just anxious for things to go well. Story 32. On my first date with my wife, at the end of the night I went to kiss her cheek, trying to be sweet. She thought I was leaning in for a hug and leaned in too, and I turned my head and kissed her neck instead. I turned bright red and was embarrassed. We said goodbye, and I almost pushed her out the door of my apartment. I immediately texted her to apologize, and she laughed. 3 years into our marriage, she apparently didn't mind. Story 33. On our first dinner date, my husband ordered a lot of food to show me his favorites at an Indian restaurant, but forgot his wallet at home and only discovered it when the check arrived. He left me to pay well over $100, and he was absolutely mortified. We have been married for nearly 2 years. Story 34. When we were dating, my husband and I were holding hands when he had to cough. Instead of letting go and covering his mouth, he held on, brought my hand to his mouth and coughed into it. It was a dry cough. If it had been worse, I would have run. Story 35. I did not ask her for her number the first time we hung out, knowing I might never see her again. My brother got her number, and I later got it from him. Some people asked why, so here is why. A friend of mine, a social butterfly, met her at a party and brought her to my place. I lived there with my brother and another friend. We were watching the movie Goodfellas when they arrived. I had seen the movie a few times before, so I went to sleep before it was over. I had to work early the next day and it was already pushing 1 a. I found out later that my brother was being a bro. He did it thinking about me, and she was not really interested in my brother in that regard. Story 36. I told my boyfriend that I wanted to have sex for the first time, and he made me wait until his Magic the Gathering tournament was over. Story 37. She had an Xbox gaming console and was staying overnight. She woke up to me playing an arcade-style hockey game and shouting goal. Story 38. I decided not to shave for a few months because I was going to be serving in the jungles of Ecuador and wanted to be a wild man. As it turned out, a thick blonde neckbeard was not very attractive. Story 39. I got fairly intoxicated and decided to tie a towel around my shoulders while completely naked, run in front of her on FaceTime, and scream, "Look at my dangle." Edit. She informed me I was mistaken. I was wearing a shirt but no pants or underwear, and it was a blanket, not a towel. Story 40. We met on the first day of high school, so there are many stories. My least favorite, according to her family, is when I left her messages. This was before cell phones and her parents owned a business. They set their voicemail to a business-style menu. You dial 1 for father, 2 for mother, and so on. I later found out it was practice for their office line and that every option went to the same recording. No matter which one you chose, I left many rambling messages asking her to call me. They were on vacation. Her 4 siblings and her parents listened to them all on speaker in a van. We kept it secret for years until we did not. It still has not stopped. Story 41. When I knelt to propose, I landed on a sharp rock that lodged in my kneecap, so we had to go to the emergency room. I did not expect this to get so much attention. My wife insisted I make a minor correction to properly embarrass myself. She says that because of the kneecap situation, I forgot to actually ask. She thought I froze with nerves and decided to save me by saying yes. She also stopped me from pulling the rock out of my kneecap with my trusty Leatherman, which turned out to be the right decision. She was a little bummed that I was not choked with emotion, but the whole situation is now a very fond memory. Side note: driving a manual transmission car with a rock sticking out of one's kneecap is not very fun. Story 42. Everything. Our first kiss is the one that sticks out in my mind. We kissed, and right as we kissed, some air moved in my throat. It sounded like a burp, but it was not. It seemed like I burped into her mouth and I was mortified. She now knows it was not a burp, but at the time she did not. I made some big blunders early on while learning who I am and who she is. I am lucky someone so wonderful saw past the foolish young person I was. Thanks to the kind person who gave silver. May today be a glorious day. Story 43. Transitioning from the uncomfortable to the comfortable phase. I was sitting across the room while she did homework. I farted pretty loudly. She looked me in the eyes and fired back. Luckily, I had another in the chamber and asserted my dominance. To my surprise, she matched me a second time, even louder. All of this happened in about 2 seconds, and thinking it was pretty funny, I tried to top her by forcing one more out to reign supreme. Well, let's just say it was not a fart I forced out. It became one of her favorite stories to tell close friends and family. We have been married for almost 4 years now, so I guess it all worked out for me. In short, soil yourself in front of potential mates if you want to get married. Story 44. I am the wife. Probably a year into our relationship, we fought about something neither of us can remember now. To make up for it, he went and bought us both dessert, which was a sweet gesture. He did it right after dinner, so I was still full and said I would shower and eat it afterward. While I was in the shower, he decided, for some godforsaken reason, to eat the dessert he had bought for me after already eating his own portion. Everyone who has heard the story is surprised that our relationship lasted after that night. I mentioned it in my vows as an example of how I will love him even when it is not the easiest thing to do. Story 45. I once spear-tackled my then-girlfriend out of misplaced enthusiasm in high school. I was excited to see her and handled it as badly as possible. It happened in front of a group of our friends. I knocked the wind out of her and made her cry. That was about 17 years ago, and we are still together. I also licked my plate at a fancy restaurant because the salad dressing was so good. She still brings that up every few years. Note: my most upvoted comment is me recounting my most shameful relationship failures. The internet is strange. Plate lickers unite. Story 46. The night I met my husband, he stared at me while I was sleeping for 4 hours straight. It has been 3 years, and he still watches me until I scold him. Then he waits until he thinks I will not notice and begins again. I love him to the moon and back, even though he would stare at me for the entire trip. Story 47. I posted this before. I am not married but engaged. I hit her finger with a hammer 3 times in a short period. I ran over her foot. She says I apparently choked her while I was asleep. I maintain I was dreaming she was falling and I reached out to catch her. We are still together, happily, after these failed assassination attempts. Story 48. In college I had a severe bronchial infection. I had a fever of 103 degrees Fahrenheit and felt useless. My boyfriend, now my husband of 12 years, said he would go rent some movies from Blockbuster and come back so we could rest for the weekend while I recovered. Blockbuster was a 5-minute drive from our apartment. An hour passed and he still had not returned. I called his mobile phone and he did not answer. Another hour passed and I called again with no answer. 2 more hours passed and I kept calling. I was terrified that he had been in an accident and I could not go out to look for him. 5 hours after he left, he called and said he was on his way home. He had gone to a friend's house to help rebuild an engine in his car. It took a long time for me to stop being angry, and I still get mad when I think about it. Story 49. I wore jorts on the first date. We were in her bed an hour later. Story 50. I flicked a dime at her head while we were playing table football. I am not sure what I was thinking. She has a scar. I kiss it every night before we go to bed. We are married and have 3 children. Story 51. My husband and I were dating while I was studying for the Texas bar exam. I spent an entire summer practicing multiple choice questions 8 to 10 hours a day. I made each question into a flashcard. There were thousands stacked in my room. At about 3 a.m. on a Friday, after drinking cheap whiskey, my boyfriend got out of bed, walked to the corner of the bedroom, and urinated on my bar exam flashcards. I was too shocked to be angry. We are now happily married with 2 young children, and I passed the bar exam. Story 52. My husband told me on our first date, "Just so you know, if we ever have a son, he needs to be named after me." I am the 5th and I could never break the tradition. I thought it was a super weird thing to say on a first date, but thankfully I decided to overlook that warning sign. 14 years later, our son, named after him, just turned 3. Story 53. We were making out in her dormitory. I was on top when I had an accident and soiled my pants. Story 54. Just a setup here. She had just graduated as an optometrist. I am still finishing my prerequisites to get into medical school, and I had been dating her for about 3 months. In my book, she was out of my league. She offered to make me a candlelit dinner of my favorite meal: spaghetti and meat sauce. At the time I was in graduate school living very cheaply. I was a Prego and shredded cheese kind of guy. She went the whole 9 yards with nice music and a white tablecloth. When I took my first bite, I must have made a face, and she asked what was wrong. She had cooked the noodles al dente, which I had never experienced. She asked if I wanted her to make something else, and I said no. It was okay. I had eaten a couple of hot dogs before I came over just in case I did not like what she made. We have been married for 20 years. To this day, I do not know what I was thinking, and I cannot believe she overlooked it. Story 55. The day after our second date, I was in a terrible financial situation. My power had been turned off and I was distraught. She came over with takeout. We ate dinner, hung out, and talked until it was too dark to see. Then we went to bed. The bed was a cobbled-together full-size mattress resting on a queen frame and box, and she did not bat an eye. She has never cared about what I had, only who I am. We have been married since March. I later told her and she corrected my memory. That night she got us a pizza, and we went out, sat in a parking lot, and ate it while talking until it was dark. Story 56. My dad stalked my mom. They worked at a business together and he had a huge crush on her. He would sniff her coat when no one was looking, overhear conversations to learn what she liked, and stare at her constantly while she worked at her desk. It worked out because my mom stalked him right back. On separate occasions, she followed him home and tried to find out places he liked to hang out. They have been married for almost 35 years, and they are the happiest couple I know. Wow, this blew up more than I thought it would. I guess that whole Yandere thing makes people love drama like this. To answer some popular questions, no, it is not like a weird anime. Maybe a little. With some details I left out, I guess I made it sound that way. But they are very much in love and happy. Do I find it creepy? Yes, but I was the outcome, so I think it turned out great. Am I a stalker myself? I will admit that, yes, during my high school years I did, in less odd ways, stalk about two crushes, and no, they did not like me back. Story 57. I had a panic attack in a restaurant and walked out, leaving her with the tab. Years later, we have a child. I guess I'm doing something right. Story 58. I donated plasma to pay for our dates. Luckily, she thought it was funny that I was prostituting my body so I could be with her, but she could have laughed at my broke 23-year-old self and dated a man with money. Story 59. My wife and I have a 12-year age gap, and I am reaching an age when everything seems to be falling apart. About 2 years ago, as a Halloween joke, I shaved my head and went as kingpin to a local party. I knocked it out of the park. Everyone loved it. She made an offhand comment that she would divorce me if my hair did not grow back. Guess what happened? It did not grow back. Story 60. For our second date, I had invited her out with me and some friends to celebrate a friend getting a job. I drank heavily. She was my designated driver. She drove me home, and as she pulled up to the curb, I threw open the door, rolled out of the car, and vomited into the gutter. She offered to help me cross the street. I yelled, "I'm disgusting," and sprinted across. Once inside, I brushed my teeth aggressively. She asked what I was doing, and I told her I needed to clean my mouth so I could kiss her. After I was done, I walked to my room, lay down, and immediately fell asleep. She spent the night to make sure I was okay. I am now holding our baby girl, who was born just last week. I asked her at one point why she stayed with me through that. She said it was because, even though I was very drunk, I had been gentle and kind, asked if she was having fun, and introduced her to everyone I knew. I am a lucky guy. I learned that brushing your teeth immediately after vomiting is bad. Story 61. Child of adult here. My parents were close to getting engaged when my mom broke her foot. My dad's friends were having a house party. Even though my mom was tired, limited, and in pain, she agreed to go with him on the condition that they would leave when she wanted and that my dad would stay sober enough to drive home. Dad got too into the party, drank more than he should, and brushed off my mom's first request to leave. Mom had to tell him she would drive herself home and leave him there unless he pulled himself away from his friends and went with her. Dad finally said his goodbyes, but he was very drunk, so they had to wait longer while he drank water and tried to sober up. He did not. Mom had to drive them both home. Dad passed out on the couch that night, and my mom was ready to end the relationship. Somehow they worked things out and married a few months later. My mom has not completely gotten over it, but she usually only brings it up when my dad tells the story about how lucky he is that she married him after that. Story 62. I ate the last bit of food on his plate, the one you leave for last because it is the perfect ending to a meal. I had been waiting for it since the beginning, and I stole it. Edit, wow, people, my most upvoted post. Bit of backstory. It was our third date and our first time out for dinner. I honestly thought the date was a huge failure because he spent a good 45 minutes on the phone due to an emergency at work, leaving me inside, alone, staring at the ceiling. When he came back, he only talked about work and how he had to be available 24 hours a day. To me, that sounded like an excuse, so I looked at his plate and noticed that last delicious bit. That's when I thought, well, fuck it. At least I'll ruin his night as he ruined mine. So yeah, it was definitely intentional. That was 12 years ago. Story 63. We were sitting in a movie theater. When the movie ended, She asked, "Want to mess around?" I said yes. It was winter. I drove her to an old parking lot and proceeded to do donuts with the car. She went pale and her eyes almost popped out of her head. Then she screamed, "You fucking idiot." I meant fool around sexually. I was laughing out loud. We will have been married 18 years in a few months. Now she specifically tells me when she wants to fool around, not involving the car. Story 64. My wife and I always played a game where one of us would say, "You're a," or "Your face is a," with the blank filled by the current conversation topic. Driving through a part of town we didn't normally visit, she looked over and said, "Wow, those houses are huge." Before thinking, I retorted, "You're a huge." We stared at each other for a few seconds while I processed my mistake. Knowing I couldn't go back, I finished by saying, "House." She laughed at me for a good 5 minutes. That was 4 years ago, and our 1-year wedding anniversary is next month. Story 65. Not married, but in a pretty serious long-term relationship. I did not realize that in one of my Tinder pictures I was clearly wearing a wedding ring. I had been divorced when I used an old picture, and the ring did not even occur to me. She asked about it and I explained. I am amazed that first she actually asked instead of immediately swiping left when she saw the ring, and second she accepted my explanation when I would have expected any woman to say, "Yeah, sure." Story 66. We were both into rough sex. She was on top, riding. I attempted to push her backward off me to put her legs behind her head. I misjudged how much force was needed and pushed her into the wall, nearly causing a concussion and slightly denting the wall. Story 67. The first time my boyfriend and I had sex, I was really nervous. I went into the bathroom to psych myself up, and when I came out I thought I was being sexy, climbed on top of him, pushed him back, and accidentally smacked his head hard into the table. It bounced and I was mortified. Story 68. We were wrestling in bed when she jumped on my back. I don't know why, but at the time it seemed like a good idea to push full force and throw her off me. She landed on her big toe and broke it. She couldn't walk without a giant boot for 3 weeks. To this day, when we play around and she ends up on my back, she latches on like a koala and yells, "Don't throw me." Story 69. I married my high school sweetheart. We have been together 3 years now. I asked her out by text when I was a shy teenager, starting with the phrase, "Would you say we have a mutual attraction?" That was the second best question I ever asked her. The best question I asked was, "Will you marry me?" Cheesy as hell, but here we are. Story 70. We were both 18. I did not have a job at the time. We met on a dating website and went to a coffee shop for our first date. I told my mother about it and she gave me $5. When we went to order, I told my date she could get whatever she wanted because my mother had given me $5. She looked at me oddly and said that was fine. She could pay for her own order. Then she proceeded to spill chocolate milk down my shirt. We have been married for 15 years. Story 71. When my wife and I met on Hinge, we started talking a lot by text. I was in Hawaii on vacation at the time, but we had matched before I left. I did not know this had happened until we started dating a year later. Apparently, I had been highly intoxicated one night and sent her a meme that I thought was hilarious and a good idea. It was the Band Geek meme and it said, "Tattooed teardrops on my dick because it straight up murders bitches." I had no idea I had ever sent that until she told me after our third date. I could not believe she went out with me after sending that. We have been married for almost 5 months, and she is the love of my life. Story 72. I drifted off to sleep while spooning naked as the little spoon and accidentally passed gas against her. Story 73. I dated 3 Yents at the same time, which was damn confusing. Dad, thanks for taking a message, but which Jen? My wife knows since it is a popular joke in the family. She found out the day she met the parents. We have been married for 24 years. Story 74. We had been dating for just a few months when unexpected changes in our housing situation led us to move in together very quickly. I went to a party at a coworker's friend's house on the 4th of July and proceeded to drink as if it were the end of the world. At some point, someone offered me acid. I was so drunk that I did not have the good sense to refuse. I started acting out so badly that I was removed from the party, and she had to come get me. The party was within walking distance of where we lived, but I could not manage on my own. She had to deal with someone who was both blackout drunk and experiencing intense effects from a hallucinogen, and I was not easy to manage. She babysat me despite having no experience with hallucinogens. Only later did I realize I was tripping and that it was probably acid because I had visual tracers. I panicked because I had to be at work in 5 hours. She drove me, and I somehow made it through the day without getting fired. It was one of the worst days of my life. Now we are married with 2 children. My career is thriving, I have my drinking under control, and she is the best mother I could ask for. Story 75. This is a famous family story about my grandfather. He was in the Royal Air Force in the 1950s. Young men on the base went to local dances to meet women. He danced with my grandmother and they agreed to meet the next day. In his slightly drunken wisdom, he wrote her address on the windscreen of his Morris garage's car. The next day the note was gone. He spent hours driving around Grimsby looking for her and asked a man if a woman by that name lived at his house. The man said yes, so my grandfather told him he planned to take her out on a date. It turned out to be the wrong house. She was the man's wife, who was understandably angry until my grandfather explained his mistake. Eventually my great-grandfather saw a young man in a Morris garage's car driving up and down the street, looking flustered, and realized what had happened. My grandparents were married for about 60 years until my grandmother passed away recently. Story 76. Where do I start? The first thing I remember is telling her that her sorority sister had nice breasts. Story 77. Not me, but my parents. On their first date, my mom ordered refried beans. My dad started laughing, and when my mom asked what was so funny, he said they were cat diarrhea. They have been married almost 25 years and are the parents of me and my 2 sisters. Story 78. I was already on felony probation for possession of a controlled substance and had not gotten my life together. She knew it. Somehow this clean-cut girl decided it was not too big a red flag when, on our second date, I went to the bathroom to hit a rail at Whataburger. We married a year later, and I have been clean for 4 years. Story 79. It was our first date and our first time meeting in person. We matched on Tinder. I told her beforehand that I was so excited to meet her and that I would not stop hugging her once we were together. When we met in the parking lot of a haunted house, I stayed true to my word. She tried to break away from the hug, and I said, "No, we are going to walk to the door of the haunted house while still hugging." After about 4 steps, I accidentally tripped her and she fell to the ground. This all happened within the first 30 seconds of meeting in person. We have been married 1 year as of this month. Story 80. On one of our first 5 dates, my husband told me that he and his ex-wife were still very good friends, and he hoped that someday she would be like an aunt to his children. I love this man, but he says some dumb stuff. Story 81. From all the comments, it sounds like taking your lady to a restaurant, smashing her face in with a glass, and making her pay for a meal is the secret to a long-term, happy marriage. Story 82. I accidentally soiled myself during dinner. I went into the bathroom to try to clean up. I paid a random man there 120 pounds for his trousers. I walked out of the bathroom wearing trousers that were a different color from mine and 1 size too big. Shortly after, a man with no trousers at all followed me. Story 83. We were sleeping in her bed at her mother's house. I fell asleep while she was reading a book. I knew I sometimes talked in my sleep and even moved, but in this case I got on my knees, straddled her, and started choking her. She told me all this the next day, and I was mortified. I asked how she knew I had been asleep. She said my eyes had given me away. Apparently she patted my head lightly. I fell off her, and continued sleeping. We dated for 5 years and have now been married 2 years. I am still amazed to this day that she is with me. Story 84. Not married yet. On our second date, I took my girlfriend to a New Year's Eve party at my friend's house. When I was introducing her to everyone, I momentarily forgot her name. I started to say her name, froze, and she had to tell everyone her name. I felt terrible and embarrassed. I am amazed she stayed with me. We are still together after 3.5 years. I remember her name now. Story 85. I am the wife, but my husband said I can share. We met when he moved in next door. One day he invited himself over for dinner and a movie. While he was cooking dinner, he let out a loud fart. He looked back and said that is his mating call. I laughed out loud. I barely knew him, but oddly enough it made me feel more comfortable around him. Story 86. My boyfriend thought he was unplugging my laptop and instead unplugged my mini chest freezer. That ruined a lot of jam, homemade sorbet, some meat, and prepared meals. I do not access that freezer every day, so when I discovered the damage, everything had spoiled. Cleaning it up was unpleasant. I was furious, but I kept seeing him. He made a mistake. It is not a character flaw. I think it actually brought us closer. We were both recently divorced. My ex-husband would have insisted that his mistake was somehow my fault. His ex-wife would have given him a never-ending guilt trip. Instead, the two of us handled it like adults. We have been together 3 years and counting. Story 87. She got absolutely trashed at her best friend's wedding, puked in her parents' car on the way back to the hotel, and then took care of me when my blood sugar dropped to between 60 and 80 because of the alcohol. I have diabetes, and she nursed me back to safe blood sugar levels. Once my blood sugar was stable, she put me in bed. I was miserable for the next day and a half. I don't drink anymore. On a lighter note, the day I proposed to her, I did it during one of my band's shows on stage. We had planned it for weeks. To prepare, about a week out with 1 or 2 rehearsals left, I had to skip her birthday. We had everything set, but she changed the song at the last minute, so I had to cancel seeing her. She was not happy. Even on the day of the show, she was still a bit agitated. On stage, in a fit of nervousness, when I reached for the ring, I accidentally struck her on the head with my bass headstock. I immediately turned around and kissed her on the head. If you watch our proposal, you can hear me speaking beforehand, bringing her on stage, accidentally hitting her with my bass, and her yelling ouch. She said yes, and we played Dancing in the Moonlight by Thin Lizzy in dedication to her and our relationship. I think I made up for missing her birthday that year. Story 88. After 4 weeks of dating, I returned to her parents' house extremely intoxicated. Apparently, I groped her on the couch in front of her parents, spoke sloppily, went to her room, vomited into a bucket, and passed out all before 8 p.m. I have been married for 18 years and have 2 children. Story 89. She was wearing a gorgeous dress and looked amazing. She was clearly happy with it. I was still messed up over my last ex. Even though it had been almost 2 years. I was scared of my feelings or did not understand them, and for some reason I said I do not like dresses after a spectacular date. I regularly try to find excuses to have her wear a dress to make up for it. She laughs and has long since forgiven me, even though she said there was nothing to forgive. But my heart still stops every time I think about it. 8 years later. It was so stupid. I could have lost her over something so ridiculous. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.